Going live any moment now. Ooh,
Okay, says this meeting is being live streamed. I think it's working. Ah, okay. Well, and yes, the notification has popped up on my phone. I think we are officially live.
oh
So,
wow.
hello, YouTube. Um, Thanks for coming, watching. Um, don't forget to like and subscribe, right? Hit that thumbs
Right.
up, the little bell notification, all that stuff that everybody always tells you to do on YouTube, right?
Right. Like, share, subscribe, call me. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let us know what you think.
right,
Feedback is important. We need to know what you like, what you want. Um, Help us help you, right?
right. That's a good one. Help us help you. Uh, yeah. Prepared for a long day. Uh,
Yes. And the carpet cleaners have already come and gone here at the house, so there shouldn't be any noise in the background except for the cats doing whatever they want to do. We got to keep them off the wet floors, so all of the cats are in this room, and who knows um, what types of conflicts may arise between three cats that don't always get along together, all being forced to coexist in a single bedroom. So if I have to break up cat fights, I apologize. But um, should we dive in?
go
I
ahead.
think we were planning today to have a theme discussion or a topic discussion focused on um, psychedelic medications, therapies, uh, science, news, whatnot. Um, the brain is an amazing organ, and psychedelics are an amazing medicine that focus very specifically on that organ in a way that a lot of other medications do not. Um, and there's growing research and evidence towards psychedelics, towards their efficacy as tools to um, help heal people. Once the demonization is kind of set aside and they're looked at objectively, there is a lot there that really has a lot of potential to help. So, um, to that end, I don't know, Pookie, do you have anything you want to add, or should we dive
Um,
into
we can
some
dive
other?
right in.
Yeah,
I had an article here. It says, "What is psilocybin therapy?" Picture of some mushrooms, crazy one in particular. Well, I wouldn't say a crazy one for lack of a better word, but yeah,
like trippy looking. Is it like a
yeah,
drawing type image, or is it an actual photograph of a really weird looking mushroom?
it's an actual photograph of a weird looking mushroom.
Okay. Yeah, there's some pretty weird shapes, weird looking mushrooms, but it's interesting actually that there are. Um, oh, are we gonna see? You're gonna show us? Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Psilocybe cubensis. Those
yeah,
are
whatever it
the
is odd looking, but it's a mushroom.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Um, Fun fact, those are um, the most widely available, most commonly grown um, magic mushroom, I guess. Um, Magic mushroom is kind of an umbrella term for a lot of, um, uh, well, not a lot, but there's a couple. I mean, there are the psychedelic mushrooms, and those the that image that we saw was one of those that contained psilocybin. There's also another one that it's like a red cap to it and the little white spots that you see a lot, um, that a lot of people think of when they hear mushrooms. You know, that's the image you see in like Mario. They have the red cap
Yeah.
with the white spots on it. Yeah, those are completely different. Those do not act on the serotonin receptors. Those are not what people mean when they talk about magic mushrooms generally, but those are legal. They contain a substance called mucimol, assuming that I am pronouncing that correctly, muscimol, that acts on the GABA receptors. Um, and that was something that is used over in, I remember reading about traditional use over in like the Northern Europe area. Um, as gross as this may come across or sound, there was traditional um, tribal use where the mushrooms were fed to reindeer, and the reindeer would go crazy, right? But the uh, substance would, get processed, go through the reindeer's system, and they would collect the urine, and the shamans would drink the reindeer urine after the reindeer had consumed these mushrooms, and the substance will have passed through the mushroom or will have passed through the reindeer and get um, essentially like filtered out. You use the reindeer as a filter and then drink your drug. And that's how those shamans would enter their mushroom trance. Um, but those are completely different from the mushrooms that were shown on that image. Um, that image is of the psilocybin type magic mushroom. Um, uh, yeah, the most commonly grown, most widely distributed natural range. It's actually native to a lot of the United States. Um, a lot of people don't realize that they could have illegal magic mushrooms growing in their yard, like their backyard.
Wait, wait,
So
wait, wait, wait. So you can
yeah,
have these mushrooms just like randomly growing somewhere?
they grow everywhere, almost everywhere in the United States. They grow wild. They're native to this region. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Those mushrooms in particular that you showed, I know that they've grown wild in the state of Florida. Um, Particularly, they like to grow on the cow patties. They Um, yeah, they're pretty easy to find out in the wild if you know where to look for them. But they're also extremely easy to grow. If anybody is interested in mycology, they will no doubt already be familiar with the cultivation processes um, for mushrooms like this. It's essentially like a controlled decomposition of whatever, you feed the mushroom or you inoculate, as they call it, when you introduce the mushroom spores into their food or growing environment. It's called inoculation, and the spores will then colonize this stuff. In that image, it looked like a cake of some sort of um, uh, a lot of people use vermiculite because it does a good job of holding water and doing like a controlled release of moisture into the area, and then just some flour, and then you add the spores to it, and they grow, and that's what the white stuff is on that little cake. And then when that white stuff in the cake, that's called the mycelium. That is actually the fungus proper. Um, the mushrooms that grow up off of the side of it, those are actually only the reproductive organ of the fungus that's growing there. The mushrooms are growing up and out with those big caps to release more spores. So yeah, when you see mushrooms, that's not the not the
Um,
mushroom fungus.
so what was I gonna say? There was a word you used with a M that I want to know what it meant.
Mycelium, is that it?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
mycelium are like basically the fungus itself. The mycelium network um, is like um, that is the part of the fungus that colonizes whatever it is that it's feeding on, and that is the part of the fungus that consumes it, metabolizes it. That's the part that grows out um, the mushrooms themselves to release more spores. So you can think of you can think of the mycelium as kind of the mushroom fungus's body in a way, sort of. And then the mushrooms, the stalk and the cap that grows out of the side of it is really, um, you know, the reproductive organs, so to speak. I mean, they're unlike anything else on Earth. Um, the fungus family, and then that um, grow the spores and everything, or grow the mushroom caps and spores. They're so different from everything else that it's difficult to come up with a a term or a word or analogy or something that can kind of be a comparison. They're not an animal, so I can't say it's the body, but it is kind of the body of the mushroom because it's what goes up. That's what sends up the reproductive organ to release the spores to colonize other parts of the world, essentially. So um, yeah, they're crazy. Mushrooms are nuts. Um, and you didn't even read the article yet. All you did was just
Yeah,
stop and show a picture.
I was thinking to can you like grow more basically? Could you put this plant somewhere and it grow like flourish somewhere else? Like if you were to what do they call it? Like when they plant something into something else, not cross plant. I forgot the word they use for it.
Transplant?
Transplant. Um, can you take one plant from a bucket and make two plants?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, it's even easier with the mushrooms and fungus, mycelium, than it is with with the plants. In certain, given certain caveats. I mean, since we're dealing with essentially something that is the decomposition process of whatever it is you're feeding it. Everything in that environment needs to be completely sterile. Because if there's any contamination, then that contamination is going to compete with the mycelium that you're trying to grow, and you're going to end up with this big contamination mess and just have to throw it all away. But assuming you've got everything completely sterilized, assuming that there's no um, cross, cross contamination, you can take that cake that has um, grown out its mushrooms, released its spores, or you can take the mushrooms off of the cake before they release the spores, um, purely for research, academic purposes, not for use or anything like that. Just education, right? Um, Caveat, YouTube, right? This is all for education only. Uh, but the psilocybin content of the mushrooms reaches its maximum just before they open their cap and release the spores. If you pick the mushrooms off and prevent that release of the spores, you can take the cake and just cut it up, break it up, and kind of set, if there's even a small chunk of mycelium that you put into another little like bucket of more mushroom food mix or whatever, the same stuff that you made the original cake out of it. Just take a little piece of the mycelium, put it in that, and the mycelium will go and spread out and colonize that new bucket. So, um, yeah, they don't need to grow new roots or anything. They just spread. If you give them more food, they'll spread further, you know. If
That's right.
they exhaust their energy, their food supply in an area, and they've released all of their reproductive attempts, then a little bit of it over into some place that has a bit more nutrients, and they'll colonize that again and release and try to reproduce again. Um, I mean, ad nauseum, as far as I'm aware. I don't think that there's any like built-in, baked-in age limit to a
Psychedelic.
mycelial network, essentially. They're all like interconnected, and feeding on their surroundings and feeding each other, and it's crazy. And I'm just an amateur. I've only done this research just on my own. I've not had any formal education in mycology, so um, there are a lot of people who can share a lot more information about all of this than I can. But even just at the surface level, there's so much to um, to think about and recognize and appreciate about these um, entities. I mean, fungi. Um, yeah. So I almost called them plants. And no, that's not right. They're not animals. It's their whole other thing. And it's yeah. I'm so used to growing the pepper plants that I just kind of default to plant when I do this. But I actually had grown some mushrooms before I even started growing pepper plants. I'd done some mushroom mycology. Um,
Really?
yeah, yeah. That's how I know what those mushrooms were, what they were growing on. You do that. You make those cakes out of that mixture. You put them in a container. You need to make sure that that container is sterilized. So I pasteurized them in a pot on the stove. Real simple. Seal them up, and it's the same sort of thing as like canning a jelly jar or whatever. You need to make sure that the jar's contents is sterile, otherwise it'll get contaminated. So you need this equally sterile. Um, it's a pretty straightforward process. And then, you can find spores online, all kinds of different mushrooms, Um, uh, yeah, sorry, what?
I was just gonna say, like, you know how like they do weed certain ways and it's all colorful and then make a green one, a pink one, or all the colors and stuff. Is there any way to make the mushrooms with different types and colors? Like, do they change kinds?
Yes, yeah, there are. I mean, just like with plants, there's all kinds of different mutations that can happen in various mycelial networks. Once they are separated from each other, they kind of go their own way. And as they go and reproduce, there can be mutations that happen in one that don't happen in another, and then you get, eventually completely different. I mean, they'll stay the same species. They're not gonna become, some completely new um, uh, fungus species, but within the the species, so like um, uh, the cubensis mushrooms that are mostly grown for, you know, in the localities where psychedelics have been decriminalized and legalized only. These There are a few different types of, subtypes of mushrooms, and some are stronger than others. Some are more desirable than others. And mushrooms don't only have psilocybin in them as the only psychoactive ingredient. Is a kind of a cocktail, a blend of various different tryptamines that the mushrooms produce in the whole process of biosynthesizing the psilocybin. So um, they yeah, there are some that look very different from others. I mean, from what I recall when I had been looking around at this kind of stuff, the um, the markets where they're legalized, um, there's a variety of cubensis called golden teachers that are, um, I mean, they have wide caps when they open. They look a lot like those that you showed in the photograph from that article, the kind of a longer stalk with the golden type of cap. And when that cap opens up, they get really wide compared to some others. Um, there are a type of psilocybin mushroom called penis envy
Wow.
because their stalk is really thick all the way up, um, and the cap, even when it opens up, it doesn't open up really all that wide at all. The top of the cap is kind of shaped, you
Mm-hmm.
know, So there's that. There's golden teachers, there's penis envy, and then there is a specific mutation underneath the penis envy. There was a an albino that ended up coming out of the penis envy lineage. So albino penis envy ape. Um, Albino penis envy are kind of um, the most potent, most sought after generally, or among the most potent, most sought after subtypes of the magic mushrooms, because there are definitely, like weed growers, there are some lineages of the mycelium that produce more psilocybin in the stalks of the mushrooms than others. Yeah.
Um, I was thinking, are there mushrooms you can get? Well, no, I was talking to someone and he was like, you got to get the right mushrooms. You don't want to get the wrong ones and you'll be sick. Um, which ones are right and which ones are wrong? How do you choose?
I mean, I'm not sure entirely what your friend was talking about. If I mean, maybe they were talking about the other type, the Amanita muscaria. I've only read a lot of these things. I haven't had the, lecture, the formal training, so I don't know how a lot of this stuff is supposed to be pronounced. I haven't heard it spoken. So, um, hold on, let me.
Yeah, I was just talking to some random dude at the store yesterday, and I asked him, "What do you know about psilocybin?" And he was just like, "Oh, magic mushrooms." And I was like, "Yeah, basically." And he was like, "I had him just trying to tell me all the friends he had them, and which ones are good and which ones are bad." And he was like, "You just got to make sure you don't get a bad batch." And I was asking him like, "What's a bad batch?" And he was like, "You'll know when you get it."
So how do you know to avoid it then? I don't know.
Right.
Um, that sounds like supremely unhelpful advice. Uh, I he may have been referring to the fly agaric, Agaric mushroom. That's the one with the white stalk and the big red cap with white spots all over it. The scientific name is Amanita muscaria, Amanita muscaria. If anybody watching wants to look it up for themselves, those are the ones that were used by the shamans with the reindeer stuff. Those are legal. Those are sold in smoke shops everywhere across the United States. Um, and so those might be what he's referring to. Those, I mean, they do cause nausea. I've never tried them personally, so this is only secondhand report, but they do cause a lot of nausea. They kind of leave you stoned a little bit. I mean, it's really nothing like the experience of the psilocybin mushrooms that um, most people are after when they say mushroom. Mushroom trip, magic mushroom. Um, so yeah, if he was talking specifically about magic mushrooms, all of them, and saying some psilocybin mushrooms make you sick and others, I mean, there might be some strains of the psilocybin mushroom, Psilocybe cubensis, that have more propensity for nausea with less trippiness. So that might be what he's referring to. But the mushrooms themselves, the come up on the psychedelic mushrooms is notoriously nauseating, um, even when it's going perfect. Um, there is speculation and theorizing among a lot of researchers about why um, the come up phase on uh, a lot of serotonergic hallucinogens. I mean, this also includes LSD. So you just eat a little tiny little square, 1 centimeter square tab of paper on your tongue and swallow it, and you feel nauseous. Like there's hardly anything there.
Wow.
Um, it's not like the with mushrooms where there's a whole bunch of dried up plant matter or plant, you see, the
Yeah.
dried up fungus, dried up mushroom, biological mushroom matter in your stomach with it. It's just a little piece of paper, but before you start tripping full on, you feel like, oh my gosh, I kind of feel like I'm gonna get sick. I'm feeling, it's kind of a tense sensation. So some psilocybin mushroom, um, those those can be dangerous. Um, you don't want to be taking too much of those, and you don't want to be mixing them up with your very, very close cousin, um, which is notoriously toxic. Um,
What
so
is
it's
that?
not. Um, it's a panther. Hold on. A panther. Yeah, panther cap. There we go. Amanita pantherina. Um, yeah, it's basically it looks the same, but instead of a red cap with the white spots, it's kind of a beigeish, brownish cat with white spots. So they're close cousins, but one will make you sick and then um, eventually kind of stoned, and the other will kill you. So um, I don't know. That's why I never really pursued any further knowledge in that direction. Those mushrooms, even though they're legal and widely available commercially, they're just it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't seem worth the trouble to go hunting for them. Um, but I mean, well, the one that kills you does have psychedelic, oh, it's not psychedelic in the serotonergic psychedelic sense, but they act on the GABA A receptors. So that's kind of interesting because the GABA A receptors um, are the receptor that um, uh, Quaaludes target also. So the kind of sedated, stony sensation that a lot of people sought from uh, Quaaludes is that GABA A receptor, and that's not to say that these are like Quaaludes, but targeting the same receptors kind of gives an idea of why they're so psychoactive. You can't activate the GABA A receptor without having a major shift in your consciousness. Um, so, is that shift in consciousness worth the potential danger if you mix up something or don't know what you're doing? Um, no, no, don't mess with these. Don't, unless you are absolutely certain, know what you are doing. Don't. Um, but um, yeah, those are the kind of the two big categories of the magic mushrooms. And so I guess in that sense, yeah, there's the one that makes you trip and the other one that makes you mostly sick. So that might be what your friend was referring to. Don't go for the fly agaric, the Mario looking red cap mushroom. Go for the brownish cap ones that you saw in the photo. And another thing, psilocybin mushrooms, when you pick them, have a characteristic bluing color. They bruise when they're held and kind of. So if you go like that cake of the mushrooms with the long white stalks, if you go and pick it off, that
Yeah.
spot where you pinch to hold it and pick it off will bruise kind of bluish when you have it there. And that's one of the
Um,
ways to identify. But
the the guy that you said your friend, that guy wasn't actually my friend. He was just like some random guy, just trying to get some kind of research from outer sources, basically. Uh, yeah, he was just some random guy at the store telling me about mushrooms.
so like friend in the South Park Canadian way. Hey, friend, I'm not your
Yeah,
friend, buddy. I'm not your buddy, guy. I'm not your guy, friend. I'm not your
correct.
friend, buddy.
I
Yeah,
sent
okay.
you a link also for uh, psilocybin therapy. Um,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that was one of the articles I was looking up, and I remember you saying something about about your interest in psilocybin therapy. Um, I didn't exactly look if it said just to specifically do with epilepsy, but there is an article. Yeah. Check that out and tell me what you feel about that. Um,
Did you send it on DM on Reddit?
no, I sent it to your phone.
Oh, phone. Ah, keep my phone away from me while I'm here, focus on you guys right now. So gotta
Gotcha.
make sure I don't get too distracted with this. There's um sure, okay. Psilocybin therapy. Yeah, that actually very interesting. That brings up another thing that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to read this in dead air. Do you want to read this article? I gotta run to the bathroom real quick. I'll be reading this too, listening, and then we can talk about the article.
Okay.
Just so that
Um,
everybody knows what article it is we're talking about, what psilocybin therapy is that we're thinking.
I got it.
Cool.
Top of the article says, "What is psilocybin therapy? History. Psilocybin therapy uses a psychedelic compound to open new neural paths in the brain. Psilocybin therapy can help with conditions like depression, anxiety, and chronic illness. Psilocybin therapy sessions last 6 to 8 hours and happen in controlled, safe setting. Uh, it says psilocybin mushrooms are colloquially known as, end quote, magic mushrooms or, end quote, shrooms, and have been used for thousands of years as a spiritual and medicinal tool among indigenous populations. This approach is based on the effects psilocybin has on the central nervous system and on how it breaks down the ego path. No, how it breaks down the ego and opens up new neural paths in the brain that can lead to change. What does a psilocybin therapy session look like? Looks like, what does a psilocybin therapy session look like? Psilocybin therapy involves a patient ingesting the chemical psilocybin while in the care of a therapist. The patient goes on a psychedelic journey in this controlled, safe environment, and the therapist facilities their experience in maintaining contact with them and asking questions during their, end quote, trip. Mm. The session lasts about 6 to 8 hours, which is a full duration of the drug's effects. In some situations, patients may use the substance more than once. The general standard is that the psychedelic journey occurs at a single time with standard talk therapy, often continuing after. How was your trip experience?
Oh, just now that was very satisfying. I
Oh
haven't
no,
done
I meant psychedelic trip, not
yeah,
bathroom trip.
yeah. Well, hey, they've both been very cleansing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know, I haven't done an official psychedelic therapy session like this. I've only ever done self-experimentation, so to say. Allegedly, everything said is purely for entertainment purposes, does not constitute admission of violating any federal statutes. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, the psilocybin is it's incredible. It has an incredible potential for healing, for helping. Um, I think it's been extremely unfairly demonized. Um, it's it's easy to see how and why. that could happen though, because it really, um, I don't know, it's like a single boop button reset, the brain, um, depression, anxiety, for a person like me who's um, extremely prone to um, depression, anxiety, mental health difficulties of all different flavors. Um, that kind of builds up in a way over time. It when it's medication resistant, when you've been on antidepressants for years, anti-anxiety medications, SSRIs are supposed to help lift the cloud of depression. They're supposed to help with anxiety. Um, it really was just its own different cloud that lowered down over me. Um, they're wonderful tools for the people that they help, for sure. I don't um, want to come across as though I am demonizing, um, these medications and or um, demonizing, besmirching, or anything about the um, healthcare system or the psychiatric profession in that, they do a lot of good. But um, there's been such a uh, um, when psychedelics escaped from the lab, essentially, back in the late 60s, they, it was Timothy Leary, I think, who took LSD out of the psychiatric research um, environment and started giving it to his students, and that kind of it spread from there and really kind of fueled a whole big gigantic counterculture movement. And um, it's it's hard to say whether the civil rights movement would have been as successful as it was without the anti-war and um, anti-establishment movement that was kind of concurrently happening, and a lot of that was also fueled by psychedelics and stuff. It kind of um, there's a sort of reset that happens that kind of lifts the
Um,
veil of everything that, the whole hierarchical structure of society that's been taken and forced on society, and you just kind of a lot of times people can just reset the depression and anxiety, because in the process you're resetting the illusion of this whole big, you know, hierarchy that these people are in power because they, such and such, whatever. It's just like, no, the, it's all kind of ridiculous. Um, and that recognition is kind of part of why a lot of the um, yeah, a lot of the counterculture movement panned out the way that it did. The um, I'm
um,
sorry, I kind of lost my
there was, well, there
thinking.
is, not was. There's
Oh,
this
how did
place
my
in Oakland, California. Uh, it's a church. Yeah, the name is Zydor. It's a church. They sell magic mushrooms. Um, how do you know the difference? Like the average person, how do you know the difference between a magic mushroom and the one that's gonna do
Like a shiitake
psychedelic?
mushroom or
Not shiitake mushroom, but yeah, like how do you know which one has psychedelic features? Just like if you're just the random trying mushrooms person, how do you specify which one can have those qualities and which ones can't?
um well, if you're in a state that in a state and or locality that permits the legal sale of these the the people who have them and are offering them, uh, if they know what they're doing, if they know what they're offering, they should be uh, cubes, as they call them, cubes or cubensis is the species name of the most commonly available magic mushroom. Um, the good ones, the really good ones, strong, um, the most sought after strain, as far as I know currently, is the albino penis envy, APE, as the acronym would
Uh,
be. Um, Penis envy also, but those are just subvariants, strains of cubensis, in the same way that, Granddaddy Perp and Pai Gow Punch and Skittles or whatever, all these, are just strain names of medical marijuana. Um, you know, apes or golden teachers are also a good, um, they're grown because they produce a lot of mushrooms by weight per thing, but you could also cultivate them yourself if one is so inclined. There is a technique that is really interesting. It makes the whole thing a lot simpler without having to go and sterilize the jars beforehand. Um, there is a product on grocery store shelves, like the pre-cooked rice packages, Uncle Ben's brand in particular, um, because it's already cooked, it's already sterilized, the rice is all right there, ready to go. You don't need to mix up any substrate or anything. So a lot of people will just get these rice packages and put mushroom spores, their shiitake mushroom spores, injected right into the package, put a little piece of tape sealed up on top of it to cover the hole, and then the bag will all, as it colonizes, the whole thing will turn white and you'll see it. And once the whole thing is fully colonized, you open up the package and take out your cake of mycelium and place it in whatever fruiting chamber you have, a simple little aquarium or something, cleaned out aquarium, nice and sterile on the inside, and just give them a little humidity, keep the temperature nice and comfortable, mid 70s or so, and they'll start pinning and fruiting, sending up your shiitake mushrooms. Um, and I mean, in a matter of a few weeks, they'll be ready to eat. And if you got it, if you got a reliable supplier, which there's a lot of very reliable suppliers online, the really interesting thing is a lot of these mushrooms are um, easily cultivated because the mushrooms are not illegal. They grow wild everywhere. So the government can't say these are illegal. Otherwise, like people all over the country would be guilty of manufacturing a Schedule One controlled substance. The
wow.
mushrooms are not the problem in the eyes of the DEA. It is the psilocybin inside of the mushrooms. So magic mushrooms aren't illegal. magic mushrooms are containers of an illegal substance. The spores released from the caps of those mushrooms contain no psilocybin. So the spores can be bought and sold freely and shipped all over the country freely. You can get the spores of any strain you want for microscopy purposes only. Microscopy, yeah, microscopy purposes only. Just to look at under a microscope, right? You're not going to take that syringe and inject it into anything and start growing the mycelium because once you have the mycelium, once the mycelium starts pinning and putting out the mushrooms, you have containers of Schedule 1 controlled substances. But the spores themselves you can buy online. Um, that would be the one like dead sure way to get a specific type that you want if you don't necessarily trust um, a provider in the area. But mushrooms are so easy to find and cultivate, even under like black market conditions, that it's uncommon to find people faking them, you know. If a person can grow them themselves with that little effort, they don't really have a motivation to try to make fake stuff. If they do, they're going to be losing a customer very easily, very quickly. So um, it's uncommon to find, you know, um, counterfeit magic mushrooms.
Um, uh, what was I trying to say? Uh, oh, when it comes to psilocybin, is there a way you could take psilocybin out of something and like what people do with weed butter? Is there anything you can do with psilocybin that it's like you can mix its qualities with something else? You know,
Um,
like make something else trippy?
there are some designer drugs that um, once you take them, consume them, they get processed directly into psilocybin in the same way that um, psilocin inside of the magic mushrooms gets metabolized into psilocybin in the body. So there are like counterfeit magic mushroom chocolate bars. That's one thing. I guess I should correct myself from just a moment ago. It is common to find counterfeit mushroom chocolates um, because it's a lot of effort to take the psilocybin out of the mushrooms when you could just take a little bit of this designer drug and add it to this chocolate bar that you're making and stuff. So in that case, though, they're not an extract of the magic mushrooms, but they still convert directly into psilocybin. So if you're looking for a mushroom trip, you know, a magic mushroom trip, and and wanting the psilocybin version, you know, not looking for the reindeer pea mushrooms, then those chocolate bars um, will get you what you're looking for, but they're technically illegal and more so than um, the decriminalized magic mushrooms themselves, because the federal government at least does recognize state preemption of, you know, decriminalization of some of these substances. So they're not going to go after people for the magic mushrooms, but the there is something called the Federal Analog Act that was created to criminalize designer drugs, where you essentially take something that was um, freshly freshly criminalized, just recently put on the Schedule 1 controlled substance. And then you look at the molecule, whatever, and you synthesize something with just one atom off, one double bond changed over to a different position, one, little addition at this carbon atom on something or another, and you get a new molecule that is completely different from whatever the government had just made illegal. And now you just have people, so that's what happened with like bath salts, or a designer drug that came about from uh, making alterations to the MDMA molecule. They're kind of derivatives um, of ecstasy, or or of a stimulant class called cathinones, which are found from a plant called khat that comes from Africa, Arabian Peninsula areas, is kind of commonly traditionally used. The leaves were chewed in the same way that coca leaves were chewed by indigenous peoples in the high Indian or Andean mountain range areas for the to combat the altitude sickness. Um, so those, they take those molecules and change them slightly, and then they can be sold, but they can't, you can't sell them as a drug necessarily. So tongue in cheek, you call them bath salts, and you get these crystals and this powder and stuff, and it's just used the same way as the drug before, but without um, the established history of use. You can get some very unpredictable behavior, some unpredictable results. Um, Things don't always change just subtly when you alter one molecule. So, yeah, but the chocolates, the psychedelic mushroom chocolates, there are some that are sold with psilocybin adjacent molecules that then actually become psilocybin. So that might be what your random person was referring to also. Um, I don't know.
Um, my my experience with the psilocybin trip, yeah, it was okay. I didn't have a bad experience. That was the first of a couple. Yeah, you ever had a bad trip? I haven't exactly had a bad trip.
I have had what I would refer to as difficult experiences, but I wouldn't necessarily call them a bad trip, because in the end, even if it was difficult to go through at the time, I ended up learning something about myself, figuring out something, you know. It was a bad trip, but why was it a bad trip? What was so negative about it? Um, because I've only ever um, experienced anything in controlled private settings, so it couldn't have been anything like out external, not like a festival or anything. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I've had several, but mostly I've had like overwhelmingly positive experiences. But I attribute a lot of that to um, of an obsessive, like tight control over set and setting beforehand, and like I'm very, very, very careful about um, uh, when I take it. I've aborted. I've been close and had everything all set up and ready and intended to have a trip, and then just at the last minute something didn't feel right, didn't seem right, and not deciding not to take it. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's there's been a couple where I've had some very um very, let me see, I don't know how to describe it. A lot of these mindsets can get very alien from what we experience and go through like on a day-to-day basis. So in a lot of these situations, it's kind of like language fails at the time. I can't think in words necessarily. So how do you go back afterwards and then describe something like that to anybody? It's I don't know. Yeah, it's difficult, but at the same time, it's cleansing to kind of be confronted with a lot of stuff that you didn't know you had, didn't understand about everything, and then um, have a difficult experience and, be face to face with things about yourself that you didn't know, didn't want to acknowledge. Um, it can be a kick in the pants. It can be the motivation that you need um, to make a change. Um, it's um, Yeah, it's crazy. It to make these things illegal, especially when the one is growing in people's backyards everywhere. There's a lot of different species aside from just the cubes that contain some. So don't go eating random mushrooms from backyards. Um, they're not, even if they bruise, even if they turn a little bluish when you pick them, don't go eating random mushrooms unless you're absolutely certain you have an expert identification and know what it is, know what you're talking about. There are some very, very lethal mushrooms out there um, that can look very similar to an untrained eye. So um, yeah, don't go eating the wild mushrooms looking for anything. But the um, the wow, I've just been bouncing around. I'm not sure what I um okay, I think I have uh let me see. Um One of the articles that I had that I wanted to discuss actually, um well, there's a couple that I thought were interesting. I wanted to get your opinion on, but this one actually is kind of um very um topical. Um, it is titled, well, I mean, I'll just like read the abstract, I guess, and we don't need to go through the whole article. It gets a little in the weeds, but it's psychedelics, epilepsy, and seizures, a review. So the abstract says psychedelic compounds have been utilized by humans for centuries for medicinal, religious, and tribal purposes. Clinical trial data starting from the early 2000s and continuing today indicates that psychedelics are a clinically efficacious treatment for a variety of neurological and psychiatric disorders. However, all clinical trials examining these substances have excluded any individual with a past or current history of seizures, leaving a large cohort of epilepsy and non-epilepsy chronic seizure disorder patients without anywhere to turn for psychedelic-assisted therapy. These exclusions were made despite any significant evidence that clinically supervised psychedelic use can cause or exacerbates seizures in this population. To date, no clinical trial or preclinical seizure model has demonstrated that psychedelics induce seizures. This review highlights several cases of individuals experiencing seizures or seizure remission following psychedelic use, with the overall trend being that psychedelics are safe for use in a controlled, supervised clinical setting. We also suggest further research directions for this field. So, I like the sound of that abstract. Um, what do
Me
you
too.
think?
Um, I'm sorry. I had I lost track of where I was at for a second.
Oh,
Say that again.
do you want me to read the abstract again, or?
Yeah,
Okay,
please.
yeah, yeah, because I think it's important. I really, um, so psychedelic compounds have been utilized by humans for centuries for clinical or for medicinal, religious, and tribal purposes. Clinical data starting from the early 2000s and continuing today indicates that psychedelics are a clinically efficacious treatment for a variety of neurological and psychiatric disorders. However, all clinical trials examining these substances have excluded any individual with a past or current history of seizures, leaving a large cohort of epilepsy and non-epilepsy chronic seizure disorder patients without anywhere to turn for psychedelic-assisted therapy. These exclusions were made despite any significant evidence that clinically supervised psychedelic use causes or exacerbates seizures in this population. To date, no clinical trial or preclinical seizure model has demonstrated that psychedelics induce seizures. This review highlights several cases of individuals experiencing seizures or seizure remission following psychedelic use, with the overall trend being that psychedelics are safe for use in a controlled, supervised setting. We also suggest further research directions for this field. So, pretty cool, I think. How about you?
Yeah, pretty cool. Who does these research studies? To be honest, I was wondering who are doing these
Uh,
studies.
I mean, do you want the names of the authors of this article or
Oh no, I mean
just,
like
yeah.
to get the results that we get. Um, yeah, I'm just wondering like, oh my goodness, having a lot of brain farts. But yeah,
It
who
looks like this
says
one
that these?
Came out of Canada. Department of Clinical Research in the Numinous, Toronto, Canada, Vancouver, Toronto. Yeah, it's a Canadian research team. So yeah, it's yeah, for a long time before I knew that I had seizures, I had been a very uh strong proponent of psychedelic um therapy. I mean, of just complete decriminalization, honestly, but that's kind of a non-starter for a big chunk of the population. But uh, Um, I don't know. It's always been a big concern that, oh, these will cause you're going to fry your brain. It'll cause seizures. And it seems like the research is kind of indicating the opposite, that it's not frying the brain, it's healing. I mean, when used in a controlled setting, right? They're not just handing out bags of mushrooms and asking the kids to come back when they're finished with them and tell them what they did, how it was like, you know. Um, this is, serious stuff. And it's just like any other drug or medication. Criminalization does not eliminate demand. It just manufactures a black market and turns average people into criminals. Um, but psychedelics are extremely unique on the Controlled Substances Act in that they are not addictive. The serotonergic psychedelics, magic mushrooms, and um, LSD and the like, mescaline, they're
Mm,
not they're not physically addictive. You can't get hooked and dependent on these substances, no matter how much you try. The brain builds up a tolerance extremely quickly. Uh, the recreational crowd that goes for this stuff usually recommend a rule of thumb of about, I mean, a minimum of 1 week, and ideally closer to a month between psychedelic journeys in order to maintain the like full spectrum of the experience. Otherwise it starts to lose its sparkle, so to speak, sparkle. Um, so um, that's um, unlike anything else on the Controlled Substances Act, even cannabis. Um, Cannabis can, as much as I don't like to admit it, can kind of lead to a bit of dependence on it. It's not addictive in the same way as heroin, but you know, if you have magic mushrooms one night, you're gonna have a big trip. You have a big bowl of magic mushrooms the next night, you're gonna trip again, but it's not gonna be as overwhelming as the first one. You keep doing it. Keep eating them, big bowls of magic mushrooms every night. And by the end of a month, you're probably going to get to a point where you could eat magic mushrooms for food and not trip. It'd be
mm.
gross. They taste bad, but
I I seen a picture of some magic mushrooms. Well, I wouldn't. Well, you could say magic mushrooms. Um, it was a bunch of it, and it was like ground up into pieces. And then somebody was like, uh, "This an eighth," and then like in the comments, somebody was like, "You only do an eighth," and I was just like, "Damn, people do a lot." And I was looking at the comments, and people were like, "I do ounces up to this month or whatever the case, or I'll do this amount." And I was just like, damn, people do a lot of them. But I never got into the doing the different amounts or whatever the case. Yeah, it looked like dirt.
yeah,
To
just
be
like
honest,
grayish brown
yeah,
dust, kind of
that's
like,
why I never got
like you
into the specific
sprinkle it into
plants.
some orange juice and kind of stir it up, and it just kind of floats at the top. And yeah, there's um, uh, legend has it that putting the ground up magic mushrooms, mixing it into an acidic um, beverage, something like orange juice, the citric acid will help to pull the psilocybin out of the mushrooms and help it to start kicking in faster. Um, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I've never considered orange juice to be particularly good or bad in either direction. Um, back in the day, not currently, not for a long time actually, but if it was available, I would definitely want to try it. If there was a study or something, a clinical study looking into um, psilocybin on depression in epileptic patients, I would volunteer for that. Um, and not just because I like the the psychedelic experience and stuff, but I think that this is important. I think that we need to know about it. And if it will cause seizures, I'm okay with having those seizures if it means that other people won't have those seizures and won't have to go through that to find out whether it causes epileptic seizures or not. Let me do it. I'll tell you. I'll show you, and you know
Right.
whatever. But depression too. That's a major thing, and there's a
I was
significant
I was
um,
gonna ask that. Are there any like properties that help with depression when it comes to psilocybin and mushrooms in particular? Yeah. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. The research is pointing um towards a structure in the brain that's known as the default mode network, um, which is a kind of an assembly, a network of these different parts of that kick in when your brain is not actively engaged in something, like not working towards something, when you're daydreaming or while you're, um, well, here, actually, I had an article open, uh, patterns of default mode network in temporal lobe epilepsy with and without hippocampal sclerosis. There's not a lot of research into it that I found immediately at the top level regarding epilepsy and the default mode network, but temporal lobe epilepsy being one of the most common regions to be diagnosed. Um,
mm,
it seems like if the default mode network involves, or yeah, wait, to resting state connectivity in the interior default mode network. Okay, here, a different one. Increased resting state connectivity in the anterior default mode network of idiopathic epileptic dogs. So idiopathic, that, no known cause. That's probably why it's so um, unresearched. So why there's such a big gap. When there's so many epilepsy patients who are idiopathic, right? And if they don't
hmm
know what is causing the seizures, then that's a variable in their research that they can't control. And if they can't control that variable, then that just um, blows away their confidence interval in whatever conclusion they get, because there's always going to be this big asterisk that we don't know what is causing, but Yeah, and this is about dogs, but the abstract says epilepsy is one of the most common chronic neurological diseases in humans and dogs, and considered to be a network disease. In human epilepsy, altered functional connectivity in different large-scale networks have been identified with functional resting state magnetic resonance imaging. Okay, so fMRI. Since large-scale resting state networks have been consistently identified in anesthetized dogs, application of this technique, anesthetization of dogs, application, they need to work on their grammar here. They need a comma. Application of this technique became promising in canine epilepsy research. The aim of the present study was to investigate differences in large-scale resting state networks in epileptic dogs compared to healthy ones. So they're looking to see if like the default mode network has a role to play in the initiation of epileptic seizures in these dogs compared to their control. Yeah, their hypothesis was that large-scale networks differ between the epileptic dogs and healthy dogs. Okay, yeah. So there's that, and then yeah, quick AI overview default mode network. It says it is a widespread interconnected brain system, including the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus that activates during wakeful rest, self-referential thought, daydreaming, and mental time travel. It facilitates internal introspection and social cognition, becoming less active during external task-focused attention. So it's kind of the parts of the brain that take over when you're not really focused on something, when you let your mind go and wonder, right? So there's been a lot of research on depression and what happens because there's been known for a while that a dose of psilocybin mushrooms, they can afterwards result in significant um, amelioration of depressive symptoms in patients. They've found this, and that's why they've been pursuing why does this work? And what they've found is that it involves the default mode network there. So um, the dose of psilocybin essentially like presses a button, right, and resets the default mode network. So if depression takes over and people have problems with their mind in that brain state where they're not actively focused on stuff, they're wakeful, rest, self-referential thought, right? So if you're awake and resting and you're depressed, right? You're going to be engaged in a lot of self-referential thought, right? A lot of daydreaming because you're not actively engaging in anything. And that takes over. And when that takes over in that setting,
Hmm.
the self-referential thought gets really negative really fast. And when that's happening, you're thinking of yourself in an absolute like worst sort of context possible. You don't see yourself positively, right? So that can get stuck for some
Yeah.
people. That can get caught in a pattern. Um, and when that takes over and runs away in that way, then you need to interrupt it, right? And well, that's the hypothesis with the psilocybin therapy. You need to interrupt that default mode network so um, yeah, the psilocybin has been found to have a significant effect in effectively resetting this default mode network so that you go from before and you have the default mode network all engaged in these negative settings, or yeah, I guess negative settings would be kind of accurate, right? If you think of your brain like a computer, all of
Yeah.
the internal settings are all turned way down, way down, like external engagement and
Yep.
positivity, all that stuff. Nah, minimize it, right? So default mode network gets re-engaged in the trip, and everything's all set back to zero. And when it wears off, then you've got this like refreshed, rebooted brain, essentially. Um, when it's done in a positive, like controlled clinical setting. So that's what is being found in a lot of the research with healthy people. But they don't have a lot of research about epileptics, um, because of all of this. So it's interesting to find now that there is this research beginning, just the very tiniest early glimmers of research beginning, um, in uh, psilocybin with epilepsy, and there's indications that there might be some overlap, that there is some engagement and some, yeah, I guess engagement's the right word, of the default mode network in the initiation of idiopathic seizures. So if that's happening with dogs, I mean, that's still a mammalian brain, right? So, um, what if that works for epileptic patients? Well, what
Right.
do you
I
think?
was thinking, um, oh my, uh, I don't know how I keep forgetting everything. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know how I forget what I was gonna say.
I rambled on too long. You had your hand raised and I couldn't stop. Sorry.
No, I think I just forgot what I was gonna say.
It's exciting stuff, though. It's hard to
Yeah,
stop.
it is exciting. That's why I lowered my hand and I'm like, hold on 1 second. But yeah, I just keep forgetting. Memory is horrible. Uh, yeah, memory isn't coming to me right now. Um,
Yeah. Here, a little bit about the default mode network. Uh, it says overactive default mode network symptoms are associated with excessive self-rumination, self-referential negative thoughts, ADHD, and difficulty engaging from internal thought to focus on external tasks. Uh, Underactive default mode network symptoms are often linked to neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's, which shows reduced function significant reduced functional connectivity within the network. Um, so, yeah, practices like meditation and substances like psychedelics can modulate default mode network activity, generally decreasing its connectivity and relieving, for example, simple symptoms of depression and anxiety. Yeah. So that was interesting, I think, or I thought, but that was not all. I have another article that I wanted to get your reaction to, or at least, yeah. So this is from Cornell University.
hmm,
Um, they are saying here, the title is A Dose of Psilocybin and a Dash of Rabies Point to Treatment for Depression. I
Mm.
can see your eyes. You look confused, right? Yeah.
Uh,
Dash of
yeah.
rabies.
Wow.
Yeah. That yeah, and it's not just like it is, yeah, it is that rabies, the like old yellow or old yeller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, International collaboration led by Cornell researchers used a combination of psilocybin and the rabies virus to map how and where the psychedelic compound rewires the connections in the brain. That is so cool. The rabies virus, they showed that psilocybin weakens the corticocortical feedback loops that can lock people into negative thinking. Psilocybin also strengthens loops or strengthens pathways to subcortical regions that turn sensory perceptions into action, essentially enhancing sensory motor responses, which that is really cool too. That kind of,
Mm-hmm.
there was, well, I don't know if I should go off on a tangent yet or not, but there was one experience back in college that I had where a group of friends had all, consumed some um, shiitake mushrooms, and we were all standing in a circle, and I'm like the least athletic person one could imagine. When I was 17 years old, the doctors did a neuropsych eval, and the neurologist had assessed my reaction times, impulses, and he said that my reaction times are that of like an 80-year-old man as a teenager. So I've never been coordinated. Um, but we're standing in the circle, and my roommates and friends were all kicking this soccer ball between them, and I was just standing there watching. Um, and hands in my hoodie pocket, and my roommate said, "Marky Mark," as he, went and he kicked the ball over to me, and I was just like freaked out. And well, not freaked out, but I was not expecting it. I looked at the ball, and right foot, I kicked it, and it went straight up in the air, and I just watched it, hands still in my pockets the whole time, watched it go up, and it came down, and I lifted my left leg and bumped it with my knee, and it went up, and it came straight down, and I bumped it with my right knee, and it went up and straight down, and then I kicked it with my left foot away. So it looked like I was just playing with it like a pro soccer player, but, boom. And they were all like, "Whoa, how'd you do that?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I will never be able to replicate that if I ever tried." I think the only reason it happened was because I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't trying. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't want to do that. I wasn't trying to bump straight up. I was trying to get rid of it. And nope, it went up, down, up, down. It made me look crazy professional coordinated. Like, ugh, wow. But yeah, enhancing sensory motor responses, you know. I was coming up on a small amount of so sensory motor responses kind of, that's an interesting. I've never really heard about anything that could potentially have explained that before, before reading this article here. So I don't know. That was kind of cool. But um yeah, they went and basically they used the rabies virus um and um turned it, like modified the rabies virus to use it as a marker, because the virus moves. backwards up the chain through the neurons that it infects. So when they have it introduced to a um, new connection made due to um, a psilocybin dose experience, they can see backwards where that neuron is connecting, and it basically lights up for them the whole network that the psilocybin experience creates in their brain. Um, you know, mouse brains, to be clear. They're not giving rabies to people, um, but yeah, they're. duh, duh, duh. With psilocybin, it's like we're adding all these roads to the brain, but we don't know where the roads go. Here we use the rabies virus to read out the connectivity in the brain because these viruses are engineered in nature to transmit between neurons. That's how they're so deadly. It jumps a synapse and goes from one neuron to another. First, researchers injected a single dose of psilocybin into a mouse's frontal cortical pyramidal neurons. Then a day later, they chased it with a variant of the rabies virus that could transmit across a synapse and label those connected neurons with fluorescent proteins. After the virus had incubated in the mouse for a week, the team imaged its brain and compared the results with control mouse brain that had only received the virus. The fluorescent tagging revealed that psilocybin had weakened recurrent connections within the cortex, feedback loops that may explain why a depressed person fixates on negative thoughts. Rumination is one of the main points for depression, where people have this unhealthy focus and they keep dwelling on the same negative thoughts. By reducing some of these feedback loops, our findings are consistent with the interpretation that psilocybin may rewire the brain to break or at least weaken that cycle, Kwan said. The researchers also saw the sensory area of the brain becomes more strongly wired to the subcortical region, strengthening the link between perception and action. Initially, Kwan expected to find connections between one or two regions of the brain, but he was surprised to discover psilocybin's rewiring involved the whole brain. This is really looking at brain-wide changes. That's a scale that we had not worked at before. A lot of times we're focusing on a small part of the neural circuit. The extensive pathway mapping also showed the amount of firing activity in the brain may determine what gets rewired by the drug. That inspired the researchers to demonstrate that by perturbing and manipulating the neural activity of one brain region, they could actually change the way psilocybin rewires the circuitry. That's interesting. They might
Right.
actually be able to control the way it. Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, so they really need to do more research now that they're finding how powerful it could be, and that there's a potential for even targeting the rewiring of the brain. If they figure out how that works and they figure out that psilocybin doesn't actually cause seizures, doesn't damage in epileptic patients, um, um, remission, then yeah, if there's a potential to wire around an area that's already a focal point for a person's epileptic seizures, then it might be able to target like targeted treatment.
Right. Um,
Like that's really cool. And they'd have a fun time while they're getting treated. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. Would you would you volunteer for a psilocybin in epilepsy patients study?
Yep, I'm down to try anything at least once.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what if the first time was a fluke? I might try anything a second time, right? Just to
Yeah,
make sure.
just to make sure that I wasn't tripping.
Or were, as the case may be.
Yeah, or make sure I was actually tripping.
Yeah. Oh, um, man, that the rabies virus part really, when I was looking around for stuff to talk about, I did not expect to see rabies up at the top. Um, that was that's pretty cool, I think. Um, yeah.
Um, I don't know.
Let's look at it works. Oh, hey, there is a. Oh, wait, that's just an ad. No cost epilepsy trial,
Um,
transportation included. Not psilocybin. I don't know. I guess we have another problem with epilepsy patients is interactions. I guess that might be a big concern of theirs. If there's a lot of medications that the person's on daily,
I
then
gotta run to the
they might
bathroom.
be. Okay.
I hear you.
Um, yeah, if a person's on a lot of medications daily, then they might be particularly hesitant to enroll them into um, a study, um, because that's a whole boatload of other potential um, problems that they can't control. Um, I don't know, but then they add medications to a person's regimen all the time without really, you know, there's a lot of, oh, your seizures aren't controlled on this, we'll add this other medication. And I don't know, have they done that much research on every single possible combination of additional epilepsy medication before allowing them to be released? Or what? Maybe interaction isn't as big of a concern as they think or as they want to portray. Maybe it's just a case by case basis that things might interact. It might just be a fluke in one person. Every person's system is unique. That's something we hear a lot, and rightfully so. Everybody's body is unique. So, um, yeah, I don't know if everybody's body is unique, then I wouldn't. I would volunteer for those studies. Give me
Yeah.
some LSD or psilocybin, like
Yeah,
some real
definitely.
really good, like high quality acid. That would be. But LSD is a little bit more stimulating than there's a little bit more get up and go behind it than the shrooms.
Yeah.
Um, I remember there was a study that was done looking into how the brain acts under the influence of these psychedelics. What was going to or what was expected with them is to see that the visual cortex would be absolutely lit up, right? Because you're getting all of these visual hallucinations, closed eye hallucinations and stuff that, um, this must be additional extra activity coming in, extra, um, yeah, extra visual input to the brain that's making a person think that they're, or making the brain interpret that all of these things around them are all wiggly, jiggly, or whatever, see these patterns and everything. But what they found in the visual cortex was more of a suppression of the activity. Uh, it was as if the visual cortex was filtering input on a day-to-day basis, and those filters were being, lowered, um, and all of this extra input was no longer being rejected before it was being perceived by the individual. Um, so if that's the case, if the addition of a psychedelic and the visual aspect of the psychedelic experience is coming about due to a reduced activity in the brain, then I don't necessarily see how seizures should be a concern in that sense. If um, things would point maybe more towards a lower level of activity in the brain, despite the subjective sense. Um, I don't know. But there's always going to be, ER reports, case
Right.
studies, oh, this person reported to the ER with mushroom-induced seizures, as they can call it, right? Um, I don't know. Anybody who can point to single one-off case studies, I can just as easily say, oh, every individual's system is unique, and how many other people are consuming and using things on a day-to-day basis without any ER reports, right? There's a lot of magic
Yeah.
mushrooms around. There's not a lot of people going to the ER.
Right.
And those who do go to the ER most of the time are just perfectly fine. They're just freaking out and having a bad trip, and they just need to be set down and watched and maybe strapped to a bed, depending on how.
You said strapped to a bed.
Yeah, I don't know. For their own safety and the safety of the nurses around. I don't know. Some people can get really, really agitated. My sister works in an ER, and she's got some uh, experiences with the sort of extreme bad trip end of the psychedelic experience, and that has kind of informed the entirety of her opinion on the issue. So there's a big part of the population who will either agree with her, be like, or will be getting the same impression in the same way, medical professionals seeing case studies that, oh, this person had seizures there, and that's bad. We don't want to risk it at all. Or, well, yeah, and then those people will then go on and be viewed as and taken as experts, um, by other people who will then say, okay, well, there we go. Drugs are bad, okay? Um, yeah. And then there's a lot of people who actually have um, partaken without any sort of issue. And those are easy for people, or for those people to dismiss, because they're doing something bad. It's circular reasoning. These drugs are bad because these people who take the people who take drugs are bad, and the people who take drugs are bad because drugs are bad. It's you got to break that circular reasoning at some point, and then the whole thing just stops and falls apart. Um, I don't know. That's um, yeah, it's,
Um,
it's,
uh, I actually gotta go here, Mark.
oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah. Well, never mind. She stopped screaming. Um,
Oh,
yeah, I don't hear anything else. All right, let's
should
keep
we
going.
check? Oh, okay.
Uh, no, usually she'll say something else. She said something, and then I heard something else, and then didn't hear anything else. Um, Back to mushrooms. I don't want to leave everybody out.
Oh,
Um,
hey, hold on here.
there we go.
There's one. Oh, come on. There we go. Yes, I'm a human. Psilocin, a psychedelic drug, exerts anticonvulsant effects against PTZ and MES-induced seizures. Okay, this gets a lot more jargon heavy after that. But yeah, epilepsy, a chronic neurological disorder affecting about 65 million people globally, characterized by recurrent unprovoked epileptic seizures. Psilocin, the active metabolite of psilocybin, a well-known psychedelic compound, has recently gained attention for its potential antidepressant and anxiolytic properties. The study aims to investigate the anticonvulsant effects of psilocin. The study utilizes behavioral seizure models and electrophysiological recordings in mice to assess the anticonvulsant efficacy of psilocin. The pentylenterazole test for clonic seizures and the maximal electroshock test for generalized tonic-clonic seizures are employed. Cortical electrical activity is monitored to provide insights into the compound's effects on neuronal activity. Okay, that gets way more. Yeah, so this is over in Britain, but they're doing research over there that's starting to look and realize that this might even be an epilepsy treatment. I mean, if you think about it, right? If epilepsy is something that comes about due to abnormal electrical signaling in the brain, and this medication is something that is known in a single dose to actively rewire, reroute, reset existing nervous system, yeah, neuronal neurosystem activity or neurons, yeah, networks. There we go. That's the word. If it can actively reset networks in the brain, create healthy ones reset the existing internal default networks, then does it not then stand to reason that there's a possibility that these rewiring of the networks might reroute around some uh, epileptic focal point in some people's brains? If their default mode network has gone off the rails into something where they're getting recurring seizures due to something in or related to or directed by that default mode network, and there's a single dose treatment that can help, even if it's like a recurring once monthly dose, something like it might be for depression. Um, doesn't it stand to reason that that could possibly ameliorate seizures in epileptic patients, right?
Yeah, if I can get the results that we're talking about, I'd love to do it.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
it's a
down
win-win,
for
I
study.
think, if you have a good time in a safe, controlled setting with medical supervision, or you have a good time in a safe, supervised situation,
Right,
and you don't have as many seizures afterwards, right?
right,
How, win-win. How
right.
can, I don't know,
It's,
who
yeah, it's a
wouldn't?
win-win, like I said.
It's only if somebody has been so thoroughly um, poisoned against the idea of these particular class of medications would it be possible to just say no offhand without any further research, If you don't use the word drug and use the word medication, don't say what it is, just describe what it does, what you expect it to do, what you hope might happen, and nothing else. Don't say psilocybin, don't say LSD, don't say psychedelic, and just describe it. I mean, who wouldn't think that's a miracle medication?
Right,
Or at the very least, just a single experience that is, like a bunch of others, it doesn't pan out. It's, I don't know. But the problem is if this miracle medication is growing in your backyard, then you don't need the doctors necessarily, right?
right.
I don't know. Um, I don't know. The supervision is a major thing. And yeah, when somebody is not familiar with the psychedelic experience and you go into it the first time, um, having somebody who understands it, who can kind of calmly guide you through it is big. Just diving right into it, jumping into it is how a lot of people end up getting really, really overwhelmingly negative experiences. Um, so I don't know. I don't know. Have you ever done them in public or tried it?
Done well.
Anything? Just hypothetically, this is an imagination, right? I, for entertainment purposes only, this story, right? I did have one time that I um, took a bunch of what was it? I took 2 grams of penis envy mushrooms, which are like strong. It's a bit more than for the average mushroom strength. It would be about 4 grams worth of dried mushrooms. Um, and I went out to Cocoa Beach, and I didn't think about it at the time, but it was Memorial Day weekend, so the beach was super crowded. And I had already um, ingested the the blue flavor Gatorade, Powerade, maybe it was Powerade with
Yeah,
the
Powerade.
mushroom powder floating on top, and it was, I don't know, it was difficult to gag down. But we got to the beach and it was already super crowded because of the holiday weekend and stuff. So we just laid out. But my friend was just running around everywhere. Um, and I just couldn't get up. I couldn't stand. I was laying there and just watched the clouds for like 5 hours, 6 hours. There's a lot of people around us, and all I could do was just, oh, and the clouds were amazing. Just unbelievable, unbelievable. Perfect weather for it. Uh, but I would not do that again if I were given the opportunity, given a second chance. I would not do it out in public in such an open out, you know,
Mhm.
place like that. I think it's best to keep it close, just
People
a
you
few
know
people. Huh?
said for sure. Make sure it's people you know, people you're safe
Yeah,
around.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's the only time I was ever even around any strangers with, um, um, under the influence. I tended to stay by myself. Uh, I don't know. I can't imagine what it would be like to like go to a Grateful Dead show and just drop acid in the middle of an ocean of other people. But I
Of
guess
people,
everybody else around you is all on that same wavelength there that dialed in and so it'd probably be a pretty welcoming group, welcoming crowd.
right?
That's what I've always heard, at least. Uh, you know, dead shows are, it's easy to find there, and it's a great place, great crowd. Everybody loves, everybody will take care of anybody who's starting to get on that downward spiral. People there watch out for each other. So that's good. Can't say the same about Cocoa Beach, Florida on Memorial Day. I don't even, yeah, that was
Um,
reckless
yeah, man.
for entertainment purposes only. None of that actually ever happened. This does not constitute an admission of anything.
Right. um, my brain is off today. I don't know why I keep forgetting things that seem really important.
Did you get a good night's sleep last night?
Yeah, I did. Um, that I can remember. Yes.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think my memory is just getting worse and worse. I thought it was just like it wasn't getting that bad, but it seems like it's just getting worse.
We gotta get some researchers to do a psilocybin assisted epileptic patient memory treatment experience study thing
Right.
going on. I'd volunteer to see if psilocybin can help improve the functional memory of epileptic patients on multiple AEDs. I think it's reasonable to think that it might, or to suspect, you know, don't
Hmm.
necessarily have any like functional mechanism that I could describe in uh, bioscience-y way, but just what we've discussed here, resetting the default mode network and all of that stuff. There are parts of the default mode network that are involved in memory. Here, actually, hold on. I had it open at the description, the functions of parts of it, because it crosses through multiple sections of the brain, and part of it is in, you know, the temporal lobes and stuff. Do, do, do.
Hmm.
Up, up, pull up. There we go. Yes, default mode system, uh, brain system involving the precuneus, the precuneus. It's probably bad pronunciation, but precuneus, posterior cingulate, and medial prefrontal cortex is significantly impaired in epilepsy, particularly during seizures with loss of consciousness. Acts as a key marker for altered consciousness in temporal lobe and generalized epilepsy. Default mode network dysfunction involves abnormal connectivity with both increased and decreased activity affecting cognitive functions, memory, and consciousness. Default mode network and epilepsy key findings from the Google AI. It says the impairment during seizures with the complex partial, generalized tonic-clonic, and absent seizures. The default mode network, which is active at rest, shows decreased activity causing loss of consciousness. In temporal lobe epilepsy, the default mode network alterations are prominent, with the hippocampus showing disrupted connectivity to the posterior default mode network, contributing to the pathophysiology of the disease. And idiopathic generalized epilepsy studies show both reduced and increased functional connectivity, which it describes in parentheses, resting state functional connectivity within the default mode network, indicating widespread, not just focal network dysfunction. And interictal activity, and even between seizures, the default mode network connectivity is altered, suggesting chronic network disruption rather than just acute ictal effects. Right. So if there's chronic default mode network disruption after and in the long run after and between seizures, and psilocybin has the potential with a single dose to reset and heal. Well, I mean, let's not use the word heal, but reset default mode network, right? Because we can't say
Yeah,
for sure what and how and the extent. But yeah, and if that contributes to the seizure activity, then this seems, I don't know. I think we're onto something here.
I think so too.
Cognitive impacts, it says the disruption within the default mode network is believed to contribute to neurobehavioral comorbidities such as cognitive impairment, anxiety, and depression in epilepsy patient. And the diagnostic potential abnormalities in default mode network connectivity are being researched as biomarkers for epilepsy diagnosis and to understand the impact of treatment resistance. Oh, treatment resistance. Yeah. Epilepsy-related default mode changes are not uniform. They vary by seizure type, location, and the duration of the disease. Researchers use EEG, fMRI to better understand the relationship between epileptic spikes and default mode network disruptions. But yeah, this is this is something. Patterns of default
Uh,
mode network and temporal lobe epilepsy. What's that? Oh, I already looked at that one. Okay. Epilepsy. Okay. There- Okay. Default mode network. Here. So this is another one. Typically, default mode network deactivations have been reported in patients with epilepsy associated with ictal and intra-ictal activity. The network plays a role in cognitive processes and conscious rest, and failure to suppress the default mode network during a task is associated with poor performance. Here, we investigated a patient with focal epilepsy located in the precuneus. Precuneus. Let's see if I'm. Oh, from Latin for forerunner. Our key hub was in the default mode network. Used EEG, fMRI to compare areas involved. 17-year-old male with drug-resistant focal epilepsy was studied. Scalp EEG indicated ictal onset in the midline right posterior electrodes. MRI showed a subtle abnormality in the right precuneus, which was confirmed as the ictal onset with intracranial EEG. Mhm. Okay, this is just medical jargon now. I don't think they gave the 17-year-old any psilocybin. Uh, I wonder if they would even be allowed to. Probably not. The amount of legal hoops that a researcher has to go to just to give psilocybin doses to an adult patient are pretty ridiculous. I think that they would probably be more restrictive over
over
pediatric.
lighter.
Yeah. Of course, 17 is barely pediatric at that point, but still, you
They give
know,
you a hard time over it, probably still.
yeah. Um, we got to find a researcher willing to look into this. Oh, psilocybin research. Oh, it doesn't have epilepsy, but psilocybin desynchronizes the human brain. That's what isn't that what the epileptic activity is that they look at or look for on the
Epileptical.
electrodes, the waves? They look for the synchronization of brainwave activity, right? And then the end when the seizure ends is when the different the electrical signals all stop synchronized, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Uh,
Yeah, because this here's an abstract from a an article in Nature that with the title Psilocybin Desynchronizes the Human Brain. And they're saying a single dose of psilocybin, psychedelic that acutely causes distortions of space-time perception and ego dissolution, produces rapid and persistent therapeutic effects in human clinical trials. I would like rapid and persistent therapeutic effects in epilepsy treatment. Um, in animal models, psilocybin induces neuroplasticity in cortex and hippocampus. It remains unclear how brain network changes relate to subjective and lasting effects of psilocybin. Here we tracked individual specific brain changes with longitudinal precision functional mapping. Roughly 18 MRI visits per patient. Wow. 18 MRI visits. That's a lot of time in an MRI tube, right? It's like,
Yeah,
don't they go like 45 minutes per, or like an hour?
I think so. Um, oh wow.
Healthy adults were tracked before, during, and for 3 weeks after high-dose psilocybin and methylphenidate. Interesting. They gave them shrooms and Ritalin
Wow.
and brought back for an additional psilocybin dose 6 to 12 months later. Psilocybin massively disrupted functional connectivity in cortex and subcortex, acutely causing more than threefold greater change than methylphenidate. Oh wait, maybe the psilocybin was the active and methylphenidate was the control. They gave either psilocybin or methylphenidate, and the people who got methylphenidate was so that they felt something different and thought that they were getting this for like so that they got any placebo effects out of the
That's what I
thing.
was thinking. Placebo effects. Gonna give some water, and you're gonna give some the real
Yeah.
thing. See who reacts to it.
Psilocybin-driven changes were strongest in the default mode network, which is connected to the anterior hippocampus and is thought to create our sense of space, time, and self. Individual differences in FC, what is FC? Oh, functional connectivity. Persistent changes in functional connectivity between anterior hippocampus and default mode network lasting for weeks. Per, yeah, persistent reduction of DMN connectivity may represent a neuroanatomical and mechanistic correlate of the proplasticity and therapeutic effects of psychedelics. Somebody wants to sound very smart.
Hmm. Um, I actually do have to go now, though.
Oh, okay.
You have a
Well,
good day, though.
yeah, it was a good conversation. Good ramble. I think I did a lot more talking than you did.
Hey, we did 2.5 hours.
Hey,
Yeah.
nice.
See you next time.
All right, take care. Bye, YouTube. Don't forget
Have a
to
good
like and
day.
subscribe.